Hello, everybody. Can you hear me? Hi, hi. Thanks. I am going to be a student real quick and do what I see a lot of my students do, which is read my speech from my cell phone. Uh, so you will see it popping up during the course of this entire thing. First of all, I just want to give you a rundown of what we're going to do. My introduction, there's going to be some readings and remarks from Junauda, and then we're going to kind of get into a Q&A up here on stage. After that, we hope to, have questions from you, and we definitely appreciate your engagement. So, hello and welcome to the first event in this third annual Black Solidarity Conference held at DCC. 2023 is the first time we're holding these events kind of in a hybrid in-person online format. Sorry. There's taken the support of a lot of people to make this event happen. I just want to take this time to thank the DCC Writing Center, our library, the Ritz Library, the Black History Committee, the SUNY Black Faculty and Staff Collective, as well as the Hudson Valley LGBTQ Center for their time and resources in helping to make this event happen. And if I missed anybody, I am sure I will get an email. But thank you if I didn't name you. I also want to take this time to thank the faculty from the English department as well for donating both time and resources to help this happen today. I want to thank the students from Spack and Kill, as well as the students from DCC who took their time out of their day to be with us today. You're very much appreciated. You didn't have to be here. You didn't have to give us your time, but you gave it. So thank you so much for doing that and engaging with us. I want to take this moment to give you a little information about Junauda. Junauda is the author of The Stars and the Blackness Between Them, winner of the 2020 Coretta Scott King Honor Book Award. She has written works for the stage, screen, and page, employing poetics and experiences remembered via ancestral dreaming and research of their lost stories. She is inspired by her parents and ancestors who immigrated from the Caribbean, bringing their magic and trauma with them. And her art ripples with their legacy. She is influenced by the Middle Passage and diaspora, Black folks in Minneapolis, ancestral magic, and stories of queerness and womanhood within these contexts. Junauda, would you like to come to the stage, please?
Hi, it's so good to be here, y'all. Thank you for creating this space and your college as well as your day to be here. And huge, gigantic thanks to Willie Morris, who not only, did so much to make everything happen so that I could be here, but like in the last minute, like dealt with some technical issues that were super stressful. So give a round of applause to Willie. I can already tell being here that you're a very special person to this campus, so thank you. So I'm here to just talk a lot about, my artistic practice and how that has intersected with my activism, as well as read from some of my book, and then we're gonna have a conversation, where y'all could ask questions. So I really know that typically in spaces like this, like I'm on stage, I'm the person whose, name is everywhere. And also I'm here to listen, I'm here to, exchange and be connected with the ways that you all are in relationship with artistry and activism and transformation, and just life. So I just wanna share a little bit about my kind of artistic journey that I'm gonna read from my book, and then we're gonna have a conversation, Willie and I would really love that as I'm going through all of these things that you just, sit with yourself and think of the ways that you are in conversation with your own artistry that feels sparked or inspired by things I'm sharing, and just think of the ways that we could all be in dialogue. So how does that feel? Good? Okay, y'all are cute. I love Poughkeepsie already, and have been just, enjoying every moment. This is kind of like awkward, so I'm just gonna put this down here. So this is me. A lot of my art career actually was sparked by the fact that I started studying circus about 14 years ago. And this is me with the Coretta, which is a very kind of more traditional aerial circus thing. So I was an aerial acrobat as a part of the circus. And that's the rope. Let's see. Boop. Clicky, clicky. So I'm a writer, playwright, filmmaker, pleasure priestess, soul sweetener, performance artist, runaway witch, occasional black aerialist, cosmic bag lady. A lot of how I think about artistry is like, what are the different parts of myself that show up and, that I get to speak through and attend to the world in. And I really think like as artists and as people, we're always put into these categories and it never quite fits. And I think a lot of my practice as an artist is to be like, well, what does my artistic practice feel like? How do I communicate that? Because, everybody's journey is unique and I want to attend to the spirit of mine. So clicky, clicky. And this is like when I do this, that means click, Patrick. Me and Patrick is real tight too because of the drama we went through earlier. So I'm a Black diaspora futurist whose work centers around Black wildness, speculative fiction, magic realism, ancestral healing, queerness, sweetness, spectacle shimmer, play and whimsy, and radical abolition. So y'all will kind of see how these things play in my work. Art is therapy to me. Writing is healing. How much of us have experienced arts as our healers? Whether we're dancing on a dance floor or singing in the shower happily or nursing heartbreak with a song on repeat. Art and creativity has always been central to movement, work, and resistance efforts in our country and the world. So like to me, art isn't just, definitely art is aesthetic. Like that's what I love about art. Art is aesthetic and beauty and, kind of feeling like you can escape into something. And I also feel like there's such a spiritual kind of transformational way that art can live and often does live in our lives, So just like holding that space. So as I mentioned, a lot of my work began as a circus artist, and doing the Coretta, the rope, was terrifying. Like circus is like this, can I swear in here? Y'all are grown, right? I don't know, tell me no. Millie, you'll be honest with me, I can't swear. Okay, thank you, I'm not gonna drop no F-bombs, I'm not suspecting, you never know. But a lot of what kind of like pulled me into aerial, I don't know, like I just literally I was on the train one day, met this Black woman who was an aerial artist. I think we were kind of like, flirting. And then she gave me her card and was like, this is what I do. And it was like her wrapped up in these silks. And I was like, what the hell? I want to do this. And I like went to work and I was like, who wants to take this circus class with me? And everybody's like, hell no. But what was amazing for me was like this experience of like learning how to literally climb and suspend myself in space. Like aerial brings movement into the vertical realm. And I'd been like a West African dancer, Afro-Caribbean, done theater and stuff like that. But circus, brought everything into the sky and was an extremely terrifying thing to do. Like you would climb even higher than this and like essentially do all these spirals down. And I was doing the rope. And the rope for me started having me think about lynching and Black people in vertical space on rope has always been violent. And here I was getting to explore beauty and magic and whimsy. So my work really became around honoring Black ancestors as a circus artist. So we're gonna just click through these pictures, like rhythmically, like maybe every 10 seconds. So this is a piece I did in honor of Tamir Rice and Sandra Bland. And I did it to the song Strange Fruit by Nina Simone. And Strange Fruit was done originally by Billie Holiday and was like sort of a protest song about lynching in the South. And if y'all don't know it, y'all should find it. But I wanted to like connect the sort of, current lynching that's not happening necessarily on ropes or by white vigilante, mobs, but by armed and paid officers of the state. And I also, with Ariel, very much, it's a thing where typically people are in leotards. Oh, could you back it up to that last slide? People are typically in leotards and, and glittery stuff. And I've done that in my aerial arts too. But with this one, I really wanted to just, see somebody who's, maybe a person coming home from work or, living their lives, somebody who maybe is masculine, and, seeing them suspended and really also kind of explore this space of beauty even to honor that person, if that makes sense. So, clicky. So the next thing I want to share about is this show I did called There Are Other Worlds, and it was my first play that I wrote. It was all about this Black mother who was an activist and had teen daughters. And in the 90s, so how would I describe it? So like it takes place in the 90s, and it's a woman who's incarcerated and the relationship she's having with her teen daughters. And she'd been incarcerated since her daughters were girls. And a lot of the show, and you could just start to kind of click through like every 10 seconds like you did before. You're doing great, by the way, Patrick. Would be like this, kind of this conversation between like, what is it to have a parent who's incarcerated? What is it to be a part of these Black liberation movements that actually leave a lot of kind of social upheaval and familial and personal upheaval? What is it to fall in love and connect? All of these things. And I wanted to use circus, which I found to be so evocative. And so like when you're looking at circus, you can't help but be suspended in a moment of magic and whimsy. You can kind of click through there. And I wanted to invite all Black women to study circus and explore these themes with me. Like, I think typically with circus, like, it's like, ya da da da, da blah da da. It's like kind of this cheesy stuff. And, that's cute. Like, I mean, I have a lot of, like, I think aesthetic art is powerful too. And I think when we have a tool like circus, like what is it to tell these stories? And it ended up being very beautiful to sort of like have this kind of tenderness and softness and whimsy that circus gives to hold the heavy of this show. And it was beautiful because none of these women had ever trained in circus before. They fell in love with it, had different kinds of body types and things like that. I remember when we shared this work with a group of kids or teenagers, one of these girls was like, now that I've seen like Black women with big butts like flying in the air, like I'll never be self-conscious about my butt anymore. Like I just feel beautiful. And I don't know, it was just like one of those things that when you do art, you don't know what are the things that people are gonna walk away with. And that was the thing that I feel like seeing, Black people take flight and honor and respect and really kind of live in this both earthly realm, political realm, spiritual realm, familial realm, and use, flight and verticalness and poetry to hold that was just, I think a very magical experience for me to be a part of. And that was a show I wrote and directed and, produced. So this is, I also have some puppets in my past. I'm just kidding. I don't know. I just think it's funny I play with puppets and I love puppets. And I think in Minneapolis is a huge like puppet culture and scene. And you could just, kind of click through these. And this is a play I did called Queen. And it was a puppet show that actually talked about a grandmother's journey through her grief after the killing of her grandson by police. And I was invited to work on it with a puppet, artist and director that I know, and I helped co-write it as well as play the role of the grandma puppeteer. And this is my colleague Julie Boada, who's an indigenous puppeteer, who's like such a local treasure, and us kind of telling this story. And there was beautiful gospel music. In the last slide, there was Lori Carlos, a beautiful ancestor who is one of the forever original For Colored Girls, who considered suicide when the rainbow's enough, which is a play that if you don't know about, I hope you find out about it. And it was her last show actually before she passed away. So we also had, this kind of intergenerational, transitional kind of ritual energy we were holding in that show. These are my friends who are, musicians, and brought some really soulful gospel holding, as well as Masa and Steve, who are two other incredible puppeteers. So yeah, like it just is. Okay, so this is me in another show. I'm gonna kind of move and smooth through this because we started a little late, and I also want to get some reading and questions in. How are we doing on time, friend? 4 more minutes? Thank you, thank you. So this is some of my performance art. This is a show I did called Water, Sweet Red, and well, you see what it's called, and the Wild Glitter Transformation. I like titles, clearly, like long, juicy titles. That's my thing. And this is my best friend, actually, from high school, and I invited my mom and my best friends to like do this weird performance, immersive installation thing in this community center I used to go to as a kid. You could start clicking through, and essentially, the experience was based off of the tarot and the Fool's Journey. So if y'all want to nerd out about astrology and tarot afterwards, I would love to. But I used the Fool's Journey and the tarot to kind of talk about my upbringing as a Black, queer, Caribbean kid in Minnesota, in the middle of the Midwest. And a lot of it was like symbolizing my different dream states, different, memories I remember, and wanting to kind of evoke that. And so I like installed it in different spaces. Does the microphone sound weird to y'all? Is it okay? Okay, it sounds okay though. So I installed all these different spaces for people to just kind of choose their own adventure. If you wanted to get a tarot reading, if you wanted to see a puppet show, if you wanted to get some food. Like I really wanted it to be almost like you're like, whoa, like you're in a dream state. And I really wanted to, and this is my friend who's an amazing puppeteer who created this amazing shadow puppet show, talking about how my parents fell in love in the islands. So it just was a thing that like you could come and just sort of live in this space and try to live in my dream space. Behind Felicia Perry, this dancer, is The Color Purple, which is like one of my favorite films and books ever, and was one of the first books that I ever heard around, Black queerness, Black female love. So that was a thing I included in it. I'm roller skating because I wanted to roller skate in my show, I guess. And I also was kind of simulating a moment from The Wiz where people are in the Emerald City. So a lot of, kind of to show in this work is that anywhere you're curious, anything that kind of, you're into, you can pull into it. That's my mom and my aunt who thought they were just cooking for the show. And then I was like, hey, could y'all act? And they were like, what? But then they ended up stealing the show and everybody was like, where'd you get those actresses? I was like, that was my mama. And my aunt, so yeah, they were, doing a scene about what it was like in the 80s being Trinidadians in, Minnesota. And then of course I had to pull a little circus in there because that's my thing. You can keep on going. Yeah, so, and you can just kind of click through these and I'll talk about this. Thank you so much, Patrick. You were like doing everything. So in addition to this like puppet and mask work I do, there's this May Day parade that would happen every year in Minneapolis, and it's this big mask and puppet theater parade. It's kind of like our hippie Mardi Gras that's like, super, social justice and political and beautiful, and it's like kind of our first warm days in Minnesota this happens. So when I started working on it, it's been around for 40 years, and when I started working on it, we focused on Black Lives Matter. So a lot of, this was me trying to bring people into Black transformation and joy and looking at Blackness as sacred, that so much, of Black Lives Matter kind of had to insist, like, our lives just matter. And I wanted to kind of lean in a little deeper and say, well, also our Blackness is sacred in the United States. Like, there wouldn't be any music that anybody is listening to without Blackness. There wouldn't be, could you imagine food in America without Black people if we just left it to the white folks? You know what I'm saying? So I just feel like, there's so much, like historical, social, political impact we've made. Like the fact that we're a democracy is due to like indigenous impacts, as well as, Black people enforcing these ideals that, these forefathers were trying to essentially hoard for themselves. So, a lot like Hannah Nicole Jones talks about in the 1619 Project is that we aren't only citizens, we're like, true patriots, and that we are wanting to have a country that lives into liberation and freedom. So anyways, part of my process with this parade is that I would invite people to come and just make costumes inspired by different things. Like one year we did a steampunk, like a Black steampunk theme, but instead of the technology being inspired by commerce and capitalism, spiritual technology. So we would have like telephones where you could call your ancestors, goggles where you can see through, your soul and other people's souls. We had music. It just was like a total gas. And my friends would be like, Junauda, when you joined Mayday, it got Black, and it was fun. I was like, I told y'all. This is one of my homies who's an ancestor. And, every year we would honor ancestors, paint their pictures. And he was a beautiful poet, had the best laugh. Like, think about the best laugh. You know how there's some people who just like laugh like an art form? Like, you won't even think this shit is funny, and then they start laughing, and you'd be like, ah. Like, then it get like, that was the kind of soul he had. This brother right here created those wings out of broken mini blinds. You know those raggedy mini blinds that always toe up? He found one and he made these beautiful wings. So it's not just, people buying things. It's also finding things and, having imagination to reimagine, which I think is such a part of activism and artistry. Is like, how are we constantly using what we have, using the pain we're in, using the whatever. This is more in the puppet realm, and I think you could just we could stop there actually. Yeah, what do you think? Should we just get into reading? Yeah, so next I'm gonna read from my book. So part of the shift in my life is that I wrote a young adult novel about 4 years ago now. And it's interesting, so like I came from this practice of art where it was very much like I'm in the streets, running, grabbing things, building things, teaching young people, being a waitress sometimes, doing all of these things to kind of make my art life work. And also very much, I'm based in Minneapolis, and which obviously got a lot of attention in the last couple of years with the George Floyd murder by Derek Chauvin, which happened 5 blocks from where I lived, and actually in the neighborhood where this parade happened. So there was a lot of kind of spiritual, local trauma that happened. And, so anyways, that's sort of the world that my book also kind of came into the world in. So I'm gonna read to y'all from this book, which is called The Stars and the Blackness Between Them. And it's about 2 Black girls, one from Trinidad, one from Minneapolis, and their love story and kind of learning themselves. The girl from Trinidad named Audrey comes to Minneapolis to live with her Black American father when she gets discovered in a relationship with a girl from church. And when she comes to Minneapolis, she meets Mabel, who is on kind of a spiritual journey of discovery herself around her body and a serious illness that she has. And also within this book is a story of Afua, a man on death row who's been on death row since he's been about 19 years old, who's a spiritual man as well as an astrologer. So I'm going to read from a scene in which we're coming from the perspective of Mabel, who is, thinking about what her sexuality is. And she's reflecting on a moment she had when she was 15 and went to a concert with her parents and started to kind of ask this question. So let me pull that up for you. So right now you're imagining Mabel, she's 16 years old, she's in her bedroom, all emo at night, listening to her music as we did as teenagers, and thinking. The next song on my list is by my favorite band, Black Lovers. All of the musicians in the band are weird Black kids, like me, I guess. I really like the lead singer, Queen Asante Wa. I like them because they is just beautiful and different. They wear simple clothes, fade haircut, sneakers. Their voice is real soft and deep and emotional, and they write most of the songs and play guitar. I think if I'm honest, I'm pretty sure I like girls, but I'm not really sure either because a part of me also likes guys like Terrell. The first time I thought about this in a real way was when I went to see Black Lovers, my first real grown concert, and I had this serendipitous, moment-long, micro situationship with this girl. My mom and dad had surprised me with seeing Black Lovers for my 15th birthday. It was an 18-plus show, but apparently the venue lets kids come with their parents. It made my whole Black life that year because this was like one of the few times they had got me something that really felt like me. Not some dumb frilly blouse or skinny jeans with embroidery or dangly earrings or a bougie manicure and pedicure. Side note, I did low-key like that shit though. It actually felt good soaking my hands and feet in water, and all of this attention on my fingers made me tingle. I found an iridescent emerald color called Octopussy, which was a weird name, but it made my nails look like the back of a beetle. So I'm at the show. I have on my Black Lover shirt, black skinny jeans, and a silver chain with Saturn on it that my mom got me for my birthday. My hair was in a braid and had a big X on my hand to show I wasn't drinking, which I thought was cool. My parents was in the cut where some of their friends was chilling and they got appetizers and drinks and was just being bougie adults in the way my mom loves and my dad is awkward about. They told me I could go to the front of the show and stay near the front. The energy of the show was very intense for me. All I could do was take in all the fly people, their different looks and colors. They were beautiful. I had never experienced that ever before. My parents let me wander into the ocean of audience and be free of them as long as I stayed close to the stage or the bougie district. They kept the phone handy. I walked around and tried to be low-key and blend in, but in that space, part of me wished I had let loose and picked a cooler outfit. I said excuse me about 11 times and twisted my body through the crowd until I was standing real close to the front of the stage. I wanted to see Queen Asante as close as I could. The wait seemed forever to come, but there was a DJ playing some bops to keep the crowd ready. When the band got to the stage, I was only a couple feet away from Queen. They was smaller than I thought they would be, but they was also everything else. More beautiful and dope, and I couldn't stop looking at them. The whole audience seemed to love and want Queen. I mean, my whole body was vibrating. They was in the zone. Queen didn't even seem to notice us at all, except for between songs when they would talk and tell little stories in their deep speaking voice. Otherwise, they would let the guitar talk and harmonize their singing alongside it. Their voice made me feel like they cared about me. I know that's weird, but that is the only way I can explain the way it feels when I listen to them. Moaning their lyrics behind the bass line, the whole band was going hard and hitting that beat. I felt every note in my gut really underground in me, and the whole crowd was feeling it too, and I was swept in our collective energy. I'm not gonna lie. I was feeling super awkward because I didn't even know if I knew how to dance like that. But then this girl next to me out of nowhere starts to groove with me. I still remember what she got on. She was so magically pretty. She was looking all witchy with the lavender-colored afro and white boots and a necklace of mandarin-colored flowers. I started dancing back before I could think about it. She was real smooth with her movements, twirling around me and dropping it low like bow. I was like, damn. I did a helpless version of my dad's two-step, and to my surprise, she seemed impressed. She soul clapped at me even, like I was killing it. She smiled and I just kept doing my thing, grinning back at her, and I don't know why I still remember this, but she smelled good, like cocoa butter, jasmine, and a little alcohol on her breath, even though there was an X on her hand like mine. All of a sudden, a crew of her friends came back with drinks, and she smiled at me and then floated away among them. I got pushed further back. It made me feel a little disappointed, but I get it. Those were her homies. But for some silly reason, I had wished we could have danced all night together to Black Lovers, and I could have maybe even known something about her. Next thing I know, I hear a familiar voice. Mabel, ooh, they are so fresh. I had to get on this dance floor and do my thing, baby. And there was my mama behind me, shimmying an old lady twerking her heart out to the music. How are we on time? I could read a little more? Okay. We played Black Lovers on the ride home, and I was still buzzing from their weirdness and freeness and blackness. I tried to relive all I saw on the stage that night. The bass player, Black Rose, who is tall and dark with a pretty smile and a pink fade, and is jumping up and dancing all over the stage. And Black Dahlia, their drummer from Senegal, who was raised in New Orleans. She moved between every style of rhythm, from congas, wind chimes, to her drum kit to a djembe drum. The keys player, Black Iris, her glittery periwinkle dreadlocks past her fat, fine butt, wearing a mint green wedding dress, her eyes closed as she did rhythms on her beat machine. And of course, my favorite, Queen Asantewaa and their emotional voice. "She's a butch, right?" my dad said from the front seat, promptly killing my vibe. She could sing her ass off. That falsetto was a Prince in his heyday. Ooh, and she played real good like Jimmy on that guitar. I'm glad we went, ladies. The way he says she and her really annoyed me. Like he knew them or understood something about them because of how they rocked their hair or clothes. Why can't you just enjoy the music, Dad? Why the first thing you wonder about them is if they butch and they don't go by she? I blurted out, feeling heat in my face. Then both me and my dad got quiet. "Saquon, the singer Queen Asantewaa goes by they, baby," my mama said, but she didn't stop there. "And ooh, that little cutie queen is a fine little tenderoni. I can see why y'all kids be acting all wild behind them," she said, revealing cougar feelings about Queen Asantewaa that nobody was wondering about. "Right, they, not she, my bad." He looked at me in the rearview mirror, but I don't think he noticed me rolling my eyes. They used to call him they used to call him Butch or Stud back in the day. I wasn't trying to be mean. I know. I did enjoy the show, though. I said that. I liked it. I just kept rolling my eyes at his fumbling, whatever. There are still Butches or Studs, but they are they and thems and more too. Mom put her hand on Dad's. This indigo generation is next level. It took me a while to pick up on it, but I get it better now. I know you wasn't trying to be insensitive, Quan, but just be mindful, okay, honey? They go by them and they. After my mom broke it down in her way, my dad and I both stayed quiet the rest of the drive. I felt like I wanted to cry for some reason, and a couple tears came down, and I wiped them slow so no one would notice, and I feel even more dumb since I was grateful I got to go. My mom turned up the volume, and as Queen's voice filled up the car, I looked at our city glitter by. Just want to sit down? Okay, cool.
So, just checking. Can y'all hear us? Yeah. All right, wonderful.
Yeah. Maybe we should just hold in our hands and we can move it back and forth. Okay, cool. You know me, I try to help, but sometimes my help brings chaos, so I'm always.
Hey, you know what? That's how we
check in.
Sometimes you need a little chaos in order to rebuild things. So.
Agreed.
So I got to be honest with y'all. When I was putting this together and wanting to do this thing, I couldn't help but avoid some of the realities that are circling around us sort of right now. You happen to bring up like 19, and I was like, oh, dang. Just this week, a young 19-year-old man was in the state of New York, put in jail for the rest of his life for some of the stuff that he did in Buffalo, New York. And I thought to myself, like, dang, putting this together, I'm bringing all these people in the same place. Am I putting you in any risk? And it was a real thought that sort of went through my head, because whenever you put anything up that has blackness or black people on it, all of a sudden you begin to discover, there's some interesting people that you didn't know were in your community. And so it's kind of funny. I was thinking about the idea of like art and risk. And a lot of what you were talking about earlier, even the fact of, hanging upside down on a rope, that is a risky thing. So I was wondering if you could just share your thoughts for a second on art and risk and what that sort of means to you now in the context of 2023.
Yeah, I think that's a very lovely question, and grounding reality that yeah, like I want to make art that changes the world, and to change the world is very risky because there's a lot of people greatly invested in the world staying the way it is. Um, and violently invested in it. And I think a lot of the ways that my art comes through is like I really do try to have my art be love soaked. Like that's kind of one of my goals, is that like when you experience my art that you feel love in it, even if we're navigating difficult conversations, it's like, so I do feel like even though I feel like I lead with love and I lead with, curiosity and care, that can be triggering to some people, especially if it's saying that all of us deserve that all of us deserve love, that all of us deserve care, that all of us deserve abundance and sweetness, which is what I believe. I don't think that it should be segregated to few. I think there's literally enough for all of us to collectivize sweetness and care. So I think with, art and risk, I definitely feel like there's always been a tension of risk in my work. Like you brought up circus. Like circus was kind of interesting to me. And it speaks to the kind of personality I have, that I'd been doing poetry, I'd been doing like dance, but kind of more so as a person that loves to do these things. And then I meet this circus artist who's like a lesbian, and I wasn't out at that time. And I just like fell in love with everything about her, that she was a circus artist, that she was queer, that she was sex positive, and I wasn't any of those things. I was like 28 at the time, now I'm 41. And having that experience that like, wow, Black people can be kind of limitless actually. I'd never met a Black circus artist. She was a single mom, had become a circus artist in her 30s. She wasn't like somebody who studied as a kid. And getting to explore that in myself, like I just started dreaming differently. And something about that risk pushed me into being an artist, because before then I was a youth worker. And then I just was haunted by circus and wanting to tell these stories. So, and I think ever since then, like even I have a children's book coming out, which I brought a copy. They're available for pre-order, but it's a poem based off of a poem I wrote called "Can We Please Give?" Oh, yeah. It's based off of a poem called "Can We Please Give the Police Departments to the Grandmothers?" And it's a poem that I wrote around the time Michael Brown's murderer was acquitted. And the reason he gave for why he murdered an 18-year-old child in the street, like, I don't even know who you would murder like that. Like, I was almost gonna say like a dog, but white folks wouldn't murder a dog like that. Sorry, it's true. But like murdering it like, whatever. Like he justified that Michael Brown had Hulk-like terrifying strength, and thus, that was the only way he could protect his life. And that man was acquitted for it. And I thought about the times that I've worked in community centers and youth organizations, and there was always like elders, like men and women who had so much love, and through that love had authority over kids, right? So I'd be like, could you go get my recycling real quick and bring it up the road? And like, the guys that the police would pester and treat like they were, criminals, would go and like attend to the needs of their community as asked by their elders, or, be invited like, oh, you come to the barbecue? Like there was a way that these people were stewards of the community with love and didn't need to resort to violence or, kind of oppression. So anyways, this book, thank you. And I could read the poem at some point if we got time, or not. Y'all could read it. I'll have it here, whatever. But I feel like, that poem, like, is a very sweet, positive poem where I'm like, give the police departments to the grandmothers, give them the Corvettes, I said give them the company cars, but make them Corvettes and Jaguars, Cadillacs, dig in the scene on the gangsta lean, let the cars be badass. Like it's all about like, these love temples instead of precincts where we get to eat. And having this book in the world, like I'm so afraid that the police gonna come for me. I'm so afraid, you know what I mean? That like, even though this is this loving vision, that there's just such a resistance. So, but yet, and still, to me, I can't do art without doing the art that I feel like will change the world, and that requires risk. And I think that's cool. I'm cool with it, but it's scary a little bit sometimes. But I'm still gonna do it.
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I wanted to, so you know yourself as, and I want to correct myself because I was originally going to say like you think of yourself as, but I'm like, no, that's not what this person knows themselves as. So you know yourself as a pleasure activist. So for some folks in the room, that's a new idea, a new term, a new reality. Can you break that down for us, and can you help us to understand how that applies to your work and your life?
Yeah, definitely. So like I think so much of my work, so much of my artist and activist practice has been, like I grew up in the 90s and 80s, and, I think a lot of us look to the 60s and 70s resistance. And a lot of that was around like kind of having to militarize ourselves against the ways that we were being attacked as Black people. I shouldn't say militarize, that wasn't what it is. It was like us having to like protect ourselves. We had to like create systems of, protection and respect, and I think that was so much of the work of the 60s and 70s was establishing our value, our beauty, all of that. And I think the 80s and 90s is like we were like taking on the next level of that. But I think a lot of that was at a detriment to our mental, physical, and spiritual health in a lot of ways, because these systems are soul sucking. And a couple years ago, my friend Adrienne Marie Brown, who created this anthology called Pleasure Activism. That's kind of the first time I heard of the term pleasure activism, but she like felt like my practice lived within this idea of pleasure activism. And pleasure activism is like, the politics of feeling good. Like that was the subtitle of the book. And a lot of it is that, why in these resistance movements, do we have to focus on the trauma and pain? Or as a part of navigating trauma and pain, how do we do it in ways that feel soft and tender and, are part of practices of care? And a lot of how I've lived into that is a lot of what y'all have seen is that like, we could resist and we could make wild costumes and honor our friends who are ancestors and honor the dead of police and all of that, and, twerk in the streets and play drums and, really allow the joy that we want to create in the world to be the thing that we practice to make it happen, versus this idea like, okay, we got to struggle, 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 and then hopefully my grandkids go and twerk in the street. I want to twerk in the street now. So I feel like for me, like part of the practice is like, okay, how do we give ourselves permission to be happy and joyful as we navigate the most kind of soul-sucking, traumatizing, oppressive realities? And yeah, like I think for me, how that lives in my practice today, even as an artist, like reminding myself it's okay to go out in nature and slow down, that it's okay for me to like, yeah, really let artistry and desire and happiness guide my work and what I do. And yeah, so I think that's sort of how it lives for me. And also, I've been doing a lot of writing around, if I'm going to create a reality that is healed, I need to heal myself. Because that's what came clear with the George Floyd of it all in Minneapolis, is that we had a lot of people who were like, let's end the police state, or the police are bad, or whatever, abolish the police. But we've all been raised in these systems of repression and violence. Like, we've all been raised in a police state. We don't know the world without the police. And actually propaganda or copaganda of that, like the police are actually amazing. I mean, my mom loves the Andy Griffith Show. Do y'all know that show? Y'all are young. It's this show about Mayberry, and the cop is like super cool, lets you in and out of the jail. He attends to the community in this really sweet way that just isn't what cops always are or even can be in this system. Like the cop and the police state is definitely derivative of the, overseer and slave enslaved, capturing systems. It's also about indigenous removal. Like we live on indigenous land, and now, so much of what was here when the first settlers came over are gone due to these kinds of dynamics. So, like thinking about like, okay, how do we acknowledge this stuff and focus on the healing and the light we want to live into while acknowledging the wounds and doing that simultaneously. And I think like that's one thing I recognize is like I need to really do healing work with myself to be like, okay, what are the ways I police myself? What are the ways that I'm like, oh, are you being too sexy? Is your body the right body? Are you saying the right things? Are you being too loud? Are you being too weird? Like that is also a part of this policing, that happens. So how do I show love and care and acceptance in the way that I would want everybody in the community to experience? If I'm going through a mental break, do I want somebody with a gun who's like, dang, what's this crazy Black woman? What's her problem? Or do I want somebody to be like, hey, baby, you okay, girl? You know what I'm saying? And like come at me gentle and whatnot. And I think a lot of us would want that. So, yeah. Sometimes a question is asked and you start answering and you be like, what was the question? What am I answering? Anyways, but it be feeling right, so you just go with it.
So I want to ask you about, in order to do a lot of that healing that you're talking about, there's a kind of intimacy that you need to develop with yourself. And what I read in your work and what I saw was that there are a lot of different forms of intimacy that were coming out. So like the intimacy that was present between, the granddaughter and grandmothers in your story, the intimacy that happens between your two main characters, Audrey and Mabel, right? The intimacy of fathers to daughters. So I was wondering if you could talk about Black intimacy and how you, as an author, create a genuine, intimate moment between characters.
Yeah, I love that. You have such incredible questions, Willie, just so you know. And I like, these are things I think about. That's why it's an incredible question, because I do think about how important love is to me. Like on Instagram, I made this sappy post about how I used to kind of hate on Valentine's Day because I think I really struggled with how much I loved love and how little I felt loved and lovable in this world. How a lot of when I'm honest with myself about what like guides me and centers me, it's love and wanting to feel romance and gushy, and also acknowledge that romance and gushiness doesn't just have to exist within, relationships that are sexual or whatnot. But I feel like, especially at this point in my life, I've been curious about how, a lot of relationships that are sacred to me are very intimate relationships that aren't with my wife, for example, but with dear friends and whatnot. So, back to the point around Black intimacy, I think there's a lot of depictions of Black, interactions and social connections or familial or relationship connections that really center the ways that trauma can tear us apart or impact us, or kind of like totally erase the ways that, like either it's sort of really harsh and complicated, or it's kind of simplistic and overly sweet and kind of takes away, like flattens the layers. And I think intimacy talks about, I'm bringing my most vulnerable, kind of scary self to I'm even looking at that part within me, and I want to be with you while I do this, and I want to make space for you to feel safe, to be your full self. Because I think a lot of us, in order to feel safe and protected in our society, have to have different barriers and different filters, even within families. Some of us got families we can't even honestly be ourselves with. And I think that's where I think even queerness is so, sort of both in the ancestral realm and in the future realm, where queerness creates family. It's like, oh, your family don't love you, you can have family amongst other queer folks, and I think in the lane of Black intimacy and wanting to center that in my work, I'm like, there's so many ways that I've been healed and gathered and cared for by other Black folks. There's so many ways that I've appreciate how our society and or like sort of Black communities can be so warm and healing and gentle and tender, and it's not depicted. I feel like one of the things about my book, like you brought up the father figures, and the father figures in my book are like Black men that I know, like kind of nerdy hip hop dudes who, really want to sort of heal wounds that they experienced in their family due to, a lot of the oppression that Black folks experience and how it kind of trickles into our familial and relationship bonds. And I feel like the hip hop generation, and like, I mean, I don't know how old you are, you look younger than me, but, people in like, who are like in their late 30s and 40s, we grew up in the 80s and 90s where it was like, oh, single mothers, like the Black single mother was like so, scandalized and stigmatized and honestly criminalized, like these teen mothers and these welfare queens and all of this stuff, and the absentee father and all of this stuff. And all of this stuff was shared without the context of, the ways that our society has actively attacked, sort of Black freedom and safety and possibility, And I think that does make intimacy hard when you're so hurt and broken and living in the shame of a society that essentially continuously wants to put social death on you because you're Black. Like Nicole Hannah-Jones said that like slavery was essentially social death because you couldn't move around in the world freely at all. Once you're a slave, you're like beholden to somebody else's imagination and oppression. And I think Black people live with that. And if you're living in a sense where you don't get to determine your own social and familial relationships, that even your life, someone can choose for you to have children by somebody you don't know or like just because of how your bodies look. And so I feel like, I really wanted to speak to all of these soft, tender spaces of love and connection, particularly with teens, with young people. I felt like as a young Black girl, I was like always, I was a little horny, but like on the repressed side of it. And I always loved reading books with little romantic and whatever scenes and things. And I wanted to write a book that was romantic and love and had sexy scenes for Black kids and also had consent and whatnot in it. So I feel like for me, there's so much examples of Black intimacy and sweetness in my life. And I don't see it in media depicted because we don't always get to tell our stories. Or if we do tell our stories, often we have pressures to live into the imagination of white supremacy or, white confusion is another term I would call that. So, yeah.
So I want to take a moment to leave some time open for questions from the audience. I guess this is that weird moment as a teacher when you ask, like, are there any questions? All right, we got questions. I got two. Hang on, I got you. Hang on. Keith, can you help? Thank you, Keith. Thanks, Keith. Keith. Thanks so much. And your wonderful plaid shirt. I know. Okay, so I saw two hands. Hang on, I'm going off stage. Can you hand that to me when I go down?
Of course. Yeah. Early.
Come up.
Oh, and I could answer from here so that.
Yeah, come up.
Y'all can have a
Hi. Oh, that's okay. Cool. Sorry about that. Oh, down. Oh, okay, cool.
Oh, you got us.
Thank you so much.
I use this one instead. Does it sound better?
Go for it.
Hello. Oh, okay. It's the same thing. So I wrote down my questions. I just have two. So, I write myself, and which is why I was really, really excited for this. I tend to get intimidated by other authors because I'm like, wow, y'all are so good. And like the idea is there, but it's still, I'm still learning. I'm still developing as a writer. But you read with such confidence, sure of your skill and your word choice. So I want to know, how did you learn to be confident in your writing? Oh, sorry. My name's
Hello,
Amina.
Amina. Nice to meet you, Amina. I like your main character hat.
Thank you.
I just think you just. I think like I wasn't very confident when I first started, for sure. Like I think writing is an interesting art form because it's also kind of personalized therapy and confession, and it's very revealing often. I think that's why writers feel vulnerable. I also think that's why, you know, some writers some writers are introverts. Not all. I mean, I'm not an introvert as a writer. I have my like qualities of introversion and going within actually, because I have to be on in ways like there's when I don't have to be in these spaces, I am kind of like can be protective of my mental space. I think as a writer, the focus should always be on joy and curiosity and pleasure. Like, what do you love about writing? Like, what are the things you could write about forever? What are the things you could research forever? Who are the writers who you love the way they say things? Who are the rappers, the singers? Like letting life be constant inspiration for you, and letting that just kind of soak you with like such you know, life force that it just spills out of you in a way that doesn't feel like you overly, like kind of get self-conscious, Because I think for me, when I'm really just letting myself flow, and part of, I think, confidence comes from like just valuing yourself and your needs. So if you're a person that's like, oh, I really like fuzzy socks. Like, man, I'll get some fuzzy socks. And when I put on my fuzzy socks, I'm like queen of the world. And this blanket and this particular hot cocoa. And I'm gonna like give myself all these things, and then I'm gonna sit down and write and really make it this pleasurable, positive experience. I think like yeah, I think that's kind of where I would focus on. And I think confidence comes with like, sharing with people you trust initially. Like I think we live in sometimes in these creative spaces where we value like, oh, critique and feedback. But I think in at least the lineage of artistry that I'm in, I see it as ritual. I see it as like a way to connect. I see it as a way to share beauty and share healing. So I think also finding a more kind of soulful, like kind of grounding in your artistry, so that if someone don't like it, you can be like, all right, you literally can kiss my ass. I don't care if you like my shit. You know what I mean? And not in a way where you're like, if your shit's bad, you won't take feedback either. Like, find the trusted people. And that's like kind of the fine line. Like, I want to be clear. There's people who just gonna hate because they wish they had the confidence you had, right? There's people who are gonna hate because, I don't know, you remind them of something that they're repressing in themselves, or want to do, I guess, is essentially what I said already. But you don't know why people hate. They might hate because, they got cockroaches in their house and they sad, and you look happy and you writing poetry. Who knows what the fuck people got going on? People are weird. I'm weird. You know what I'm saying? So I feel like you kind of got to stay in your own bubble about like, okay, I'm keeping positive joy. Like, this is my ritual. This is my relationship with myself. And have the people who you're like, oh, you're a good writer and you have a way of helping my writing get stronger by the way you say it. Because if you have somebody, because I have a friend who's a great editor, but I don't have her edit my shit. Because she's like, oh, and this thing right here, and this, and I'm just like, girl, now you done got me like, you done dried my little coochie up with these feedbacks. You know what I mean? Like, I just need somebody to help me be in my zone. So I think like being, discerning and figuring out the spaces that keep you in your zone, and it'll allow the confidence, I think, will come from that. Yeah. Thank you, Amina.
There we go. And my second question, it's a little bit lengthier. So everything you've shown us that you do, it looks like you really live your life to the fullest. Especially like if I were to say your two main purposes of your life would be to help and to be happy. And a lot of the students are unsure of what to do next, but know that they want to help and be happy as well. So I would say, what's your advice for students who know this, have multiple things they're passionate about like you, but are afraid that chasing their dreams won't make a living? or may take too long. Like, you know, students are like, okay, I know what I want to do. It's not this major. Now I have to switch and do 60 credits all over again. You know, how do they get over that fear or even know if it's worth it?
Yeah, following your dreams is always worth it, even if it doesn't come out the way you want, even if there's failure, even if you get rejected. Because to be accepted where you're not happy isn't good either. And I think a lot of people are forced, because we live in a capitalist society that's actually very extractive from human beings, and it's very, like, I don't know, I'm just quoting the heck out of Nicole Hannah-Jones today. Like, our capitalist system is more based off of the slavery system than the Industrial Revolution. You know, like the Industrial Revolution, you know, was based off of the way that slavery was like very orderly about, like, we need 10 hours of labor from this person and this much sugarcane or this much cotton. So much of us are barely, you know, surviving to make our, you know, needs met. And our society makes us choose, like, well, you want to eat, right? Yeah. Then you might want to put down the paintbrush. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of like this sad sort of reality. And I still feel that chasing your dreams is the most important thing you can do in your life. Because at the end of the day, it's life. You're going to die. And then if you're like, oh, gee, I had a really great job sewing buttons, or I had a really great job, you know, at the Apple store, and, you know, you might like the Apple store. That might be your passion. But if it's not your passion and you really like to paint, then make sure you are painting a little bit every day, every week, no matter how, because that's the thing about me, and I don't think this is a good thing about me. Part of it is because I'm a little bit, you know, I'm kind of like, you know, like art is my therapy. Like, it keeps me not chaotic and crazy, actually. And I think for a lot of artists and creatives, if you don't let yourself do your art on some level, you are gonna get unstable. You're gonna be whacked to the people in your lives. It's gonna make you effed up, right? Yeah. So I feel like, you know, being afraid about money is totally real, and you still gotta pursue your passion, because at the end of the day, everybody on their deathbed isn't like, gee, I'm glad I worked for a raggedy ass, you know, Best Buy. That's where my wife works. And I'd be like telling her, you know, like, hey, I'm glad that you got a solid job, you know, first of all. Second of all, you know, what brings you joy? Like, let's do that, you know, too, because at the end of the day, oh, sorry, if y'all, well, y'all already posting it. Best Buy, you're great. And my wife is a happy employee of your organization. Yeah, so like for me, it's like, I think, you know, even if we gotta like work jobs that we don't love, like know what you love to do. Like, you know, there's people who are, you know, drag queens, you know, at night, and like are school teachers during the day and love maybe being a school teacher too. Like, I don't think your day-to-day job is something that you may even hate. It may be thing you really like. I love doing youth work, but youth work wasn't circus for me. You know, like circus was my thing, writing is my thing. And I think following your passion will also help you be creative about how to make money in ways too. So I think like one advice I would give as a practical thing around money is that there's all kinds of ways to make money, and actually relying too much on a job sometimes like will put you ass out if that job don't want you no more. You know, so like I just think like we are already kind of forced into a hustle economy. Are we wrapping it up? We have to wrap it up? Okay, yeah, we gotta do another question. Yeah, I'm horrible with questions. There should be a 2-minute thing going on. Uh-huh. Oh, sorry. Oh, my bad, yeah. Okay, cool. And I'll hang around afterwards to, you know, beyond this. Okay. Yep. Cool, I'll hang out with everybody and we could just kiki. It's all good.
Hi, I'm Naomi, and did you just wake up and was like, oh, I want to be unapologetically Black? Did you just wake up like that, or do you, like, please explain how you just decided to find your voice and find your style?
That's a great question, because I didn't just wake up like that, or wake up like this, as Beyonce would say. But like, I think for me, I grew up in the 80s when it definitely was like, everything about Blackness was like a problem. everything about being of African from Africa. Like Africa wasn't seen as like, how we got Afrobeats now and Burna Boy and everybody knows Africa's where it's at. Back in the day, they had commercials with, kids who were starving with flies, and that's what we thought Africa was, so much of my identity with Blackness is seeing all of this like kind of lies and kind of, fantasies or, sort of, bad examples of what it is to be Black, and knowing deep down inside that there was more to us. Even like Black History Month, I was like, thank you, Black History Month. I know we just gonna do MLK, Rosa Parks, and Malcolm X, but I'm gonna take it and I'm gonna go further, And I think a lot of it is actually doing research around Black people and Black history and knowing that, like, man, like I come from something beautiful. I feel like it comes looking in the mirror and just like really reminding myself that I'm beautiful, even if there's things in our society that would disconnect me from my beauty and my sacredness, I think it's acknowledging that our society does do things to make us not like ourselves, that if we struggle with loving ourselves and liking ourselves and seeing our beauty, it's not for a mistake, it's because it was an active project to make us feel this way. So I feel like having grace and compassion for ourselves as we learn to love ourselves. And so it wasn't overnight, it really has been a lot of work, like for me, like I studied abroad, in Brazil and Cuba, I've been to Cameroon, that's where my wife is from. I studied West African dance. Like I really wanted to know, and, I fell in love, with being Black in a way that sadly, like my society, absolutely, if I were to be what the society wanted me to be or feel about myself the way the society, I would be Candace Owens. I would be, not that y'all would have me at your school, but like, you know what I mean? Like that mentality of like the white people we're running things good until we decided to get free. You know what I mean? Like that's what the propaganda of the society is. So the fact that you're even like, here with your beautiful braids and beads, asking good, smart questions, you already are doing that work, so even giving yourself that acknowledgement, and you're young, it's just the beginning, Like I'm 41 now, I really think my confidence really shot up literally when I turned 40. And that was last year. So you're like, okay, girl, you new to this, but I'm true to this.
Okay. Can I ask one more question?
They love me. Let's just keep just one more question. No, sorry. Willie's like the daddy of the room.
Just one more.
If y'all are okay with hanging out, we can ask more questions. But you good with that? Are we good with that? All right, go for it.
Yeah, and if you gotta leave, you could leave, right?
And I think, hang on,
Right.
you did have a question over here. So if you do her question, you gotta do her question.
Oh yeah. Listen, let's just kick it. Like, let's kick it. Yes. What's your next question?
Who inspired you? Because for me, you guys are gonna hate me for this. I like Chris Brown because he started from the bottom and literally made it to the top.
He's kind of still at the bottom in a social, spiritual way, but we don't have to have. I don't even know why you invoke Chris Brown. Let's stay to the question.
Okay.
Because now we're going to dialogue
sorry.
Chris Brown, and we don't need to do that.
Yeah.
Okay.
But like, who inspires you? Do your parents inspire you? Do you inspire yourself? Like, what's up?
I feel like for me, definitely growing up, like I think about my aunties, like my mom's sisters were just like goddesses to me. They're a Trini. So, they just had this like beautiful way of speaking. One of my aunts was a dancer, the good food. Like, I think like that was definitely inspiration. My mom is a very kind of dignified, woman. She's a Taurus and really like, cute and beautiful. And I think I always had I was extremely insecure growing up around, my beauty, around my worth, about whether I was lovable. And I think that's actually a thing that, in my writing, I try to hold that space of how sometimes you feel that way. But my mom isn't that way. My mom is like, every time she goes to the co-op, she swears, I swear somebody's like, there's a story about somebody being like, excuse me, miss, but you are so beautiful. Like she always has stories about people telling her how beautiful she is, Like that's where she lives in the world, And I really am grateful to her for that because that's not who I am naturally, So definitely her. I think definitely as I've gotten older or even as a teenager. Thank y'all so much for coming. Have a good day. yeah, like even as I've gotten older, you know, it's definitely like a lot of writers, um, like Alice Walker, Toni Morrison, Audre Lorde, Octavia Butler, James, you know, all of these folks have deeply inspired me. People who lead with their truth, you know, and actually were quite brave in doing that. I think like lately, I really do love like Megan Thee Stallion. I'm sorry. I don't know. I love her confidence and that she's able to kind of speak to her pleasure and sexuality while also being political, while also, you know, speaking up for Black women and also being nerdy and quirky. Like, I like people who feel like they can be their full selves. Like, I look up to people like that. So, yeah. What, oh, you gotta go? I wanna answer your question real quick if you want. Sorry.
Thank you
It's
very
okay.
much.
Thank you so much. All right. Oh, y'all got a bus? Oh, shoot. Okay. I feel like I want to walk out and answer your question now. Yell your question. I'll just say it real quick while you walk out. Oh, yeah, that's a great question. I can name some of them: Audre Lorde, anything by Audre Lorde, Octavia Butler, Sada, Shakur. And I could share a list of writers and with Willie, and then they could share with the teacher. Thank y'all so much. Y'all are the best.
All right, everybody, thank you for coming out today. We definitely appreciate your time and energy. Junauda will be sticking around for a couple of minutes, so if you want to buy a book or get a book signed, you can. Junauda, we got tables, books, stuff out there for you. So thank you again.